All right, so this is the pre-AP only section, which is composite functions. So just like previous functions, we're still inputting things, right? So we're still plugging in things for variables or plugging in certain inputs to get certain outputs. So with composite functions, you're actually dealing with two functions at once. So we're going to go ahead and start with number one. Now, number one is saying that we're going to take f of 2 and add it to g of 3. So we need to actually do these functions separately and then bring them together. So first it wants us to find f of 2. Now remember, what is this 2 really replacing, right? It was f of x, but now it's f of 2. So they're replacing the 2 with an x. So they're giving us two functions to begin with. They want us to use f of x equals 4x plus 3 and g of x equals x minus 2. They're giving us two different functions here, and they're asking us to use them to solve these problems. So with number one, it's saying f of 2. They're wanting us to plug in 2 for x for our f of x function. So we're going to use this function right here and plug in 2 where anywhere I see an x. Remember, this is where x was. So I'm going to take f of 2. So anywhere I see a 2 or anywhere I see an x in this function, I'm going to plug in a 2. So 4 parentheses 2 plus 3. Again, I'm using this function right here. So I'm just plugging in 2. And remember, this doesn't really mean anything. This just means I'm plugging in 2 for x. So that part doesn't mean anything. You're not asked to solve that part, nothing of the sort. All right, and then so we have 4 times 2. That's going to give us 8 plus 3. 8 plus 3 equals 11. All right, so we did half of this. We solved for f of 2. So when we plug in a 2 for our input, we get an output of 11. Again, we've only done the f function. Now we're going to go ahead and do the g function. The g function is g of x equals x minus 2. So here I'm asked to find g of 3. Now remember, this 3 is replacing the x that it once was, right? Because this is g of x, and now it's replaced with a 3. So they're telling us, hey, plug in a 3 for x for the g function. So I'm going to plug in a 3 for this function. So I'm plugging 3 in for my x variable right here, minus 2. So anywhere I saw an x, I plugged in a 3. Now again, remember, this doesn't mean anything. This is just telling you, hey, I'm plugging in a 3 for x. Like, that's all I'm doing, nothing special. So now I just have a parentheses of 3. So really, this is just 3 minus 2, right? Because outside the parentheses is really just a 1. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, so what is 3 minus 2? Well, that equals 1. So what do I do with these two values? Well, it wants me to add them together. It wants me to take f of 2 and add it to g of 3. So that would tell me I would need to do 11 plus 1. 11 plus 1, which is going to equal 12. Right? So I took f of 2 and I added it to f of 3, and I get 12. That's really all you're doing. So you're just using two functions to solve them. Okay, now going on to number 2, we have f of negative 1 minus g of 4. Okay, so also I forgot to mention, remember when we were, oops, oh my goodness, I can't touch the eraser button for some reason. Hello? There it goes. And again, I probably should have put parentheses around this. 11 plus 1. 11 plus 1 just gives me 12. Okay, now we're going to solve for f of negative 1. Now remember, f of negative 1, the negative 1 is in place of the x. So they're wanting you to plug in an x or a negative 1 for anywhere you see an x in the f function. So make sure you're using the right function. So here I'm using f of x equals 4x plus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in a negative 1 where I see x's. So I have 4 parentheses negative 1 plus 3. Now remember, this part's just telling you, hey, I'm plugging in negative 1 for x, nothing special, like that's what I'm doing. And then the right side is actually what you're actually computing. So 4 times negative 1 is going to give me negative 4 plus 3. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. All right, so negative 1 is my answer for the first part of this. Now I'm going to go find g of 4. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use the other one, which is, remember, this is x because it was g of x, and now it's g of 4. So I'm going to solve for this by plugging in an x, or plugging in a 4 anywhere I see an x. So I plug in a 4 here, minus 2. Again, we're using this function, the g function. Okay, so again, parentheses of just 4 is just going to be 4 minus 2, and that's going to equal positive 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. Now, what am I doing with these two? I am subtracting them. So I'm going to be super careful with this one. Negative 1 minus 2. Well, this just simplifies to negative 1 minus 2 like this, which equals negative 3. So that's going to be my simplified expression here. All right. So now we're going to do number 3. Now I have 2 problems like this one because this one it can be a little bit tricky for some people. All right, so even if this was a multiplication sign, what you would do at the very end is you would multiply them, by the way. I know I don't have an example like that, but just wanted to make you aware. All right, number 3, we have f of g of 5. So this one's a little bit different because now f of x, instead of the x, it has a g of 5. So this one looks a little bit weird. You're going to start on the inside first. You're going to start in this section first. You're going to start with g of 5 first. G of 5. You're going to do that first, and then whatever number you get for that number, you're going to plug that in for the x value for f. So we'll do number 3 slowly, and then we'll do number 4. Okay, it wants you to do g of 5 first. You always start on the inside and then work your way out. So g of 5, that means I need to use the g function, which is this one. And I need to plug in a 5 anywhere I see an x. So g of 5 means I'm going to plug in 5 for my x there, minus 2. Again, I'm using this function here. All right, well, that's just going to be 5 minus 2, which simplifies to 3. Okay, but I'm not done because all I've solved for is g of 5. So what does g of 5 equal? It equals 3. So if g of 5 equals 3, then this actually just equals 3 on the inside of these parentheses, right? So now I have to solve for f of 3. Okay, so now I have to move on and find f of 3. Okay, so again, we started on the inside. We solved for g of 5 first. Well, I just solved for g of 5. I got 3, which means this number inside the parentheses is now a 3 because g of 5 equals 3. They're equal, so I'm replacing g of 5 with 3. So now I have to find f of 3. Well, f of 3 means I'm going to have to plug in a 3 anywhere I see an x in the f function. So this would be 4 parentheses 3 plus 3 here. Again, I'm plugging in a 3 anywhere I see an x. So I'm going to get 4 times 3 is 12 plus 3, and 12 plus 3 is 15. Okay, well, once I'm there, there's nothing left for me to do, so I'm complete. I'm finished. Okay, so what did we just do? You start on the inside, solve for g of 5, and then whatever number you get for that, you're going to plug it into f. All right, moving on to the last one, 4. All right, number 4, we have g of f of negative 6. All right, so this is the one where they're encased inside of each other. You always start on the inside first. So I'm going to start on the inside of these. So the inside's telling me to do f, well, that's very shaky, f of negative 6 first. So f of negative 6. So I'm asked to evaluate this function first. So I'm going to use the f function and plug in a negative 6 anywhere I see an x. So I'm going to use this f function here. F of x equals 4x plus 3. So f of x equals 4x, but I'm going to plug in a negative 6 plus 3. Again, you're using the f function because it's telling you to use the f function. And you're plugging in a negative 6 for x because that's what they have replacing the previous x value. Well, 4 times negative 6 is going to be negative 24 plus 3. And then negative 24 plus 3 is going to give me negative 21. Okay, but I'm not finished because what did I just evaluate? I evaluated f of negative 6, and I got negative 21. So this is replaced now with negative 21, which means now I need to find g of negative 21. So this is going to be brought out, and you're going to find g of negative 21. Again, you solved for the f part first, and now you're going to evaluate for the g part, which is the second. But you can't do the g until you find f because f came first. Okay, so this is telling me I'm going to evaluate the g function. Anywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug in a negative 21. Whoops. Oh gosh, what's happening? Negative 21, parentheses, minus 2. Okay, well, negative 21 would just be negative 21 minus 2. And so my last expression would be negative 23. Okay, so these can require some practice. Again, you want to break it down into parts. So with number 1, you're adding them. So I would evaluate the f function, then evaluate the g function, and then I would add them. With number 2, I would evaluate the f function, evaluate the g function, and then subtract them. For number 3, this is the one where they're encased inside each other, and you always start on the inside. So on the inside, you have g of 5. So you would evaluate for g first, and then you would evaluate for f, depending on what number you got. For number 4, this is another in-case problem. You evaluate for f of negative 6 first, and then whatever number you get there, you're going to plug that into g and then evaluate g with that number. So this can be a little bit tricky, so make sure you get some practice with this, and if you have any questions, please let me know.